Well, the United States has no official language in the Constitution. We always fear that by hearing foreign languages in the streets, that there is somehow something wrong with that. You should really be speaking English or not speak at all. Well, the short answer is that no one had done it before. The longer answer is that the essential topic of all of this has to do with immigration, and in particular the immigration of a population of people who have pretty much vanished from the cultural scene as an identifiable entity. So our job was to make them more visible. Sometimes they were, as with the Acadians, deported from where they were by the British and dispersed. Doesn't mean they vanished completely. They're still there, they're just not visible anymore. And these were the descendants of people who began arriving as early as the very first years of the 17th century, before Jamestown. Actually, prior to that, in the latter part of the 16th century, they made inroads into Florida. Unfortunately, they were stepping on the land of the Spaniards and were summarily dismissed. You had some others in what we would call the Midwest these days, because you have to remember that New France wasn't just Canada, it was everything from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. They created cities. You have St. Louis, Missouri, and all sorts, St. Genevieve, and all of these cities along the Mississippi. What is left these days is just that, the French names of the cities. If you're talking about French people per se, people born in France who live here now, you're talking maybe about 250,000 everywhere throughout the country. But if you get into other French-speaking populations, then you have to take into account, for instance, the Haitians. That's probably the most recent French-speaking group to arrive in any kind of numbers. But you also have perhaps something like 30,000 Moroccans. One of my students this semester, who came from Northern Virginia, said that fully half of her French class in high school was made up of Vietnamese. Immigration is a subject that the U.S. population has on its mind these days. Diversity is not always welcome by people, but I don't think that we're ever in any way handicapped by diversity. I think diversity is something that causes us to be much more flexible in our approach to other human beings. We ought to welcome it as being yet another way of understanding this very, very complex fabric that our country is made of. Well, the only place really where French has been maintained, I would say, is, except for the tourist industry in New Orleans, would be Cajun country.